It's the summer of 2025 in downtown, it doesn't matter which city. Pick one. Seattle, Chicago, Denver. It looked the same in all of them. A line of people stretching down the block, teenagers mostly. Some of them drove for hours. Some of them are wearing white t-shirts with a blindfolded man printed on the chest, soaked in red. A black hearse pulls up to the curb. 4 men in suits slide out the back and pull a silver-white casket onto the sidewalk. They wheel it past the line of fans, through the front doors, and into the venue. The crowd goes wild. Inside, the casket sits center stage. Flowers, a funeral wreath, and a long table with a guest book, as fans started lining up to sign their names and write letters to the deceased. Above it all, a giant portrait of a man in a blood-stained white dress suit, white blindfold wrapped around his eyes, staring at nothing. This is not a funeral. This is a David concert. The blindfolded man in the portrait is his alter ego, Itami. It's Japanese, and it means pain. 1 month after this exact night, on December 8th, 2025, officers at a tow yard on North Mansfield Avenue in Los Angeles will respond to a call about a foul odor coming from an impounded Tesla. They will run the Texas plates on a 2023 Model Y, and they will pop that front trunk. Inside, zipped inside 2 black cadaver bags, covered in insects, is the dismembered body of a 14-year-old girl. She had been reported missing by her family 3 times. The first time, 19 months earlier. Her head and torso are in one bag. The rest of her is in another. Her body is found 1 day after what would have been her 15th birthday. The man whose name is on the Tesla registration is the same man standing next to that casket a month ago. The man whose alter ego is called Pain. He is in Minneapolis the night after they find her, playing a show. He had been rehearsing his own funeral for 3 years. Now, 7 months after the initial finding, he's been arrested and charged with first-degree murder. And here's the part that keeps me up. This did not happen behind closed doors. Thousands of kids were watching it happen on a Discord server in real time. One of his own fans typed it out in plain English in a TikTok comment section 18 months before her family filed the first missing person report. The exact words were, "Waiting for LAPD to get your ass for messing with a 13-year-old girl," and nobody did anything. Not his label, not his Discord moderators, not the people who watched the live stream, not the police, who found her in Hollywood in early 2024 and drove her back to Lake Elsinore, and apparently didn't ask enough questions. Okay, I need a second before we get into this because I have been following this case since the body was found in September, and I have read everything. Every court filing, every sealed declaration that leaked through a Texas appellate docket that it was never supposed to touch, every Discord screenshot, every statement from every person in his orbit who got dragged in front of a grand jury. And I still find myself sitting here going, how did this happen in plain sight for 3 years? Not just that, but the prosecution's own timeline has a hole in it. The night the district attorney says Celeste Rivas Hernandez walked into that house and never walked out, the man on the Tesla registration was already on a flight to New York City. 12 days later, somebody dismembered her body. He was in Seoul, North Korea by then, photographed with a wound on his hand. The district attorney was asked, on the record, whether anyone else would be charged. He did not say no. A 55-pound incinerator, rated at 1,600 degrees, sat in the corner of his rental house. A chainsaw, brand new, the protective shield still sealed over the chain. A digital camera in a drawer with photos still on the SD card of a 14-year-old girl. who had been officially missing for 9 months. An email a fan sent flagging her as a missing person that the manager later denied receiving. A swatting call placed in a digitally distorted voice to his parents' house in Texas. On the same day, he started transferring property deeds out of his name and into a trust under his mother's. We are going to be walking through every single piece of this in order until you understand exactly how a 14-year-old girl from Lake Elsinore ended up in the front trunk of a Tesla 1 mile from the house her boyfriend's manager was paying $20,000 a month to rent. But before we get to the body, before we get to the tow yard, before we get to any of it, you need to understand who David actually is. Because the story doesn't make sense without it. David, whose real name is David Anthony Burke, is 21 years old. Born in Queens, New York, to a devout Christian household. David and his family moved to Houston when he was 13. He was homeschooled after 8th grade. His dad ran regional litigation support for a global law firm with 75 offices and over 1,500 attorneys on staff. The guys who worked at David's parkour gym in Houston would later say that pulling him out of public school changed him, visibly. That they watched something shift in his energy. One of them put it like this: I could just see the shift, headphones on, just disconnected. Before the music, he was a Fortnite montage YouTuber who couldn't monetize because of copyright strikes. He got fired from Starbucks over $14 worth of sandwiches he'd grabbed on an employee discount. He thought it was a standard perk. The manager had accused him of committing felonies. Then his sister let him use her closet. Wired Apple earbuds in iPhone and BandLab. That's what he used to record one song called Romantic Homicide, in one take, against his mother's advice, uploaded in July 2022. Number 4 in the Billboard's Hot Alternative Songs chart. Darkroom and Interscope signed him that September. He was 17 years old. And here's the part that matters. David told interviewers in his own words how he wrote love songs without ever having been in love. I would go on Discord and Fortnite and let people talk to me and tell me about their lives. And I would basically just take their lives and write songs about them. In his own words, his explanation of his own creative process was that the kids on that Discord server were his source material. One of those kids was an 11-year-old girl named Celeste. Before we get to her, before we get to any of it, I want to walk you through what the LAPD found in that tow yard. Because that discovery is where this story starts, and everything before it, everything you're about to hear, is what explains how a body ended up in the front trunk of a Tesla 1 mile from David's house. On September 8th, 2025, in Hollywood Tow on North Mansfield Avenue, in a lot full of cars nobody wanted anymore, a worker noticed a smell. Tow yards smell bad on a normal day. Oil, stagnant water, rubber baking in the sun, trash that's been sitting in someone's back seat for a week. But this is not that. This smell is coming from the front trunk of a 2023 Tesla Model Y with Texas plates. The car has been sitting in this yard for 3 days. Before that, it sat on Bluebird Avenue in the Hollywood Hills for nearly 6 weeks. Neighbors had been watching it since late July, just parked, never moving and dented on the rear bumper. Nobody touched it. On August 27th, a parking enforcement officer marks the tire with white chalk, notes the dent, and files a report. On August 28th, the 72-hour citation goes up on the windshield. On September 5th, it got towed. And for 3 days, it just sits there in the lot. A colder day than usual for Hollywood. Not thick summer heat or muggy. And still, the smell coming from the front of that Tesla is strong enough to stop people in their tracks. The workers call the police. LAPD runs the plates, and the car is found registered to an address in Hempstead, Texas. The name on the registration is David Anthony Burke, known professionally as David. The officers open the trunk. Inside, covered in insects, in a black cadaver bag containing a decomposed head and torso. Underneath it is a second black bag with the rest of her. The medical examiner will later confirm that the arms and legs had been severed. The remains are of a girl, approximately 5'1", 71 pounds, wearing a tube top, black leggings in a size small, a metal stud earring, and a yellow chain bracelet in the shape of the letter W. She had been in that car for weeks at minimum, possibly much longer. The car is registered to David Burke, yet it has never been reported stolen. His tour schedule has him performing in Minneapolis the very next night. His manager had been renting a house 2 blocks from Bluebird Avenue, where that Tesla sat, and yet the car, the same one who had the body in it, and it was never reported missing. The LAPD begins the process of identifying the body. It takes 8 days for forensic and dental examination because the decomposition is so severe that the medical examiner can't determine the cause of death, nor can he determine eye color or age with certainty. On September 16th, 2025, the remains are identified as those of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, born September 7th, 2010. Her body was found 1 day after what would have been her 15th birthday. Right now, you probably want to know everything about the relationship between David and Celeste. And we're going to get there. But before that, I need you to understand who she was, because the answer doesn't start in Hollywood. It starts in a small town about 75 miles southeast of Los Angeles, on Interstate 15 in the Inland Empire, on Lake Elsinore. Lake Elsinore is not Hollywood. It's a small town with a wide main drag, bail bondsmen next to taquerias, next to nail salons, a Walmart at the edge of town, and a shooting range on the road in. Filled with a heavily Hispanic working class, this is the kind of place people grow up in and stay in. The kind of place where you know your neighbors, and your neighbors know you. Celeste Rivas Hernandez grew up here. Her parents were first-generation immigrants from El Salvador. Her mother, father, an older 18-year-old brother named Matthew, and an older sister. The family lived in a modest home on a quiet street where kids played out front, where the corner liquor stores, security cameras had been watching Celeste walk past on her way to school every morning since she was small. Ellie Naduff owns that corner store, called Delgado Spirits. Having spent 11 years behind the counter, Ellie knew her since she was a little kid. Beautiful, quiet, shy girl, he told TMZ. She didn't seem wild. Ruby Alonso lives a few houses down. She has known the family since Celeste was in kindergarten. She told the LA Times that Celeste was studious, a hard worker, and intelligent. Celeste went to Lakeland Village Middle School. She had curly black hair and was quite small for her age. She loved Hello Kitty mugs, Hello Kitty Crocs, a Hello Kitty keychain her friends said she carried everywhere. On her index finger, a small tattoo that read, "Shh." Remember that detail. We'll come back to it. She liked candy and soda, Ellie would see her duck into the store after school with her friends. She didn't say much, grabbed her snacks, paid, and left. This is the version of Celeste you would have met if you'd grown up in Lake Elsinore. But by 7th grade, something had started shifting. She had told friends at school that she wasn't happy at home. She had told a boy named Damon Hernandez, a grade above her at Lakeland Village, that her mom didn't treat her well, that she had wanted to run away. Damon had briefly been her boyfriend. He was 14, she was 13. TMZ later interviewed him. She said how her mom didn't treat her well or whatever, Damon said. She didn't like where she was at. She was a 7th grader who wanted out, and she started talking to someone online. Her classmates knew she had a boyfriend. She didn't say much about him, just that he was older and that he was somewhere far away. On February 14th, 2024, Celeste's family files a missing person report with the Riverside County Sheriff's Office. It's the first one. She comes back within days, but doesn't say where she's been. There is a recording that comes out of Lake Elsinore's middle school a few months from this point. A kid in a 7th grade science class will hold up a phone under her desk and capture her teacher mid-lecture, mid-grief, telling the class what happened to one of his former students. The kid filming did not know she was recording the most important piece of secondhand testimony in this case. We are getting to it. But first, you have to understand how many times Celeste Hernandez was in the system's hands, and how many times the system gave her back. On March 19th, 2024, at 7 a.m., Celeste walks past Ellie Nadul's liquor store on her way to the bus stop. But she's not going to school. The footage shows her jogging with a backpack on, moving fast past the cameras that have been watching her for years. Her older sister walks into the store the next day and asks Ellie if she can review the footage. She's looking for her little sister. She pulls it up, and there it is. A second missing persons report. Authorities recover her a second time, and she comes back. On April 5th, 2024, her family files a third report. This is the last one they will ever file. For this time, Celeste does not come back. 1 month later, in May of 2024, her mother gets a phone call. It's Celeste's voice. They talk for a little while. Her mother tells her to come home. That is the last time Celeste's mother will ever hear her daughter's voice. A few months after that, at Lakeland Village Middle School, in a science classroom, a teacher is standing in front of his students. He knows her. She used to sit in one of those desks. He had just learned the day before what had happened to her. He's trying to explain it to the kids in his class. He does not know that one of those kids is sneaking a recording on a phone. When I taught her, she met this dude on social media. He was a rapper in LA. He came and got her. She ran away from home. She was gone for like a month. The cops found her in Hollywood, brought her back to our school. She came back to our school, kind of told people this story. She disappeared again in May of that year. That's when her friends told me what happened, that it was the rapper. And then I found out yesterday that she's now dead, in that rapper's car, cut into pieces. I've listened to that recording more times than I want to admit. And every time, the part that gets me is not what the teacher says. It's what's happening in the room while he says it. A 7th grade science classroom and a teacher in front of his board, breaking down because one of his former students just turned up dead. And one of the kids in his class, hearing this, decided the most important thing she could do in that moment was hold her phone under the desk and hit record. That is who told us this story. Not a detective or journalist, but a 7th grader with a phone she was not supposed to have out, capturing the only piece of testimony in the case that connects us with what was happening at school to what was happening online. In September 2024, 5 months after that third and final missing persons report, surveillance footage from a home on her parents' street catches her in an argument with a neighbor. She is back on the block she grew up on. She is 14 years old and alive. She is yelling. Someone in the footage screams at a kid to go call her dad, and then she walks off camera. That is the last time Celeste Rivas Hernandez is seen alive in Lake Elsinore. Her mother, a year later, will post a message online. 6 lines. I want to read one of them. My mom hasn't spoken in a week. She feels she failed her daughter, but she didn't. She did everything. Our house is quiet and broken. The teacher said he was a rapper in LA. Celeste's mother, by the time police came asking questions, already knew his first name. Her brother had already met him once, in person. So how does a 13-year-old girl from Lake Elsinore end up as a girlfriend to a 19-year-old superstar an hour and a half up the freeway with 1,000 people in his Discord server watching it happen in real time? To understand that, we have to go back to 2021, when Celeste was 10 and when David was nobody. Just a kid in his sister's closet uploading Fortnite montages to an audience of strangers. And now one of those strangers, we now know, was a little girl from Lake Elsinore. In 2021, David Burke was 16 years old, homeschooled, and still living in his parents' house in Houston. Had a few thousand YouTube subscribers for Fortnite montages, and a few hundred plays on SoundCloud. He also ran a Discord server with a couple hundred kids in it. Nobody knew his name yet. He was on a competitive Fortnite team, Limit Esports, playing under the gamer tag Chronic Ant. Late teens, men in their early 20s, they scrimmaged together, ranked together, and linked in voice channels for hours a day. One of those teammates spoke publicly after Celeste's body was found. Quote, he met her in like 2021 playing Fortnite, I'm pretty sure. Then he made her get Discord. Everyone in the team knew about her, and he would joke about it and brush it off every time it got mentioned. Everyone in the team knew. A user account with the name Celeste was created on Discord in January of 2021. He was 10. To understand what happened next, you have to understand what David's Discord server actually was. Because everything from this point forward only makes sense once you see it, once you see the space he built. Discord is a messaging app. You join a server, which is essentially a chat room for a community. Thousands of people can sit in one server with multiple conversations running across different channels at the same time. The chat scrolls past you in real time. It moves too fast to police. Musicians use Discord to build fan communities. David did the same. Thousands of kids eventually joined his server. Most of them are teenagers, and most of them were younger than he was. He pre-released songs there, leaked unfinished tracks, went live on Twitch from there, talked directly to his fans there. In an interview, in his own words, my Discord is my core fan base. You know, someone's not vibing with something, I sneak it in the Discord and leak it myself. That is the public version. The private version according to a user who claimed to have been in the server. David wouldn't add us back, but he followed his underage girl fans immediately. One of us made a teenage catfish girl account, and David immediately followed the catfish account back. That was the landscape. A server full of kids and a system in which if you were a girl and you presented as underage, you got pulled in fast. In January in 2021, into that space, a 10-year-old girl from Lake Elsinore joined. In 2022, David's world looked different. Romantic Homicide, recorded in his sister's closet, had hit number 4 on Billboard's Hot Alternative Songs chart, and number 3 on the Hot 100. He was 17 and flying to LA. Subscriber count exploding, edits of his face on autoplay on TikTok on millions of phones. His Discord server went from a few hundred members to several thousand. Celeste was 11. The music video for Romantic Homicide premiered on YouTube on September 7th, 2022. Celeste's 12th birthday. David played a detective. He also played his alter ego. He named the alter ego Itami, Japanese for pain. Here's how David explained the concepts to interviewers in his own words. There was an evil version of myself that would kind of come out at random moments. He would commit the crimes that I would have to solve as the detective. I'd be like solving murders that I'm committing myself. An evil version of me named Itami, which means pain in Japanese. He's basically an agent of chaos and kind of my alter ego. The video is built around naturalistic imagery with candles, a blindfolded figure standing in front of a young woman who appears dead, blood, a bloody rose motif, and a white dress shirt soaked through. On October 23, 2022, 7 weeks after the music video went live, David posted a message into his Discord server. Celeste in here? According to screenshots that later surfaced online, a new user joined the server seconds later with the username Celeste. Her reply read, "I just joined, LOL." Then they started messaging. Celeste, my parents are so effing annoying. Celeste, they won't let me see you perform. David, don't worry, I'll fix it. Other users on the server were watching this happen in real time. 1 month later, in November of 2022, David released the music video for Here With Me. He washes ashore on a beach wearing a blindfold and thinks about a girl with curly black hair and a white flower in her hair. They run along the coast as he sings to her and watches the sun rise as they grow old together. He told interviewers the song was inspired by the Disney movie Up. Carl and Ellie, growing old together. Celeste was in 6th grade when it came out. A few months later, in early 2023, another music video. This one shows David playing a dead body. He wears clothes to make himself look smaller than he is. At the end of the video, his body is placed into the trunk of a car. He was 18. By March of 2023, users in his Discord server had started talking openly. A user posting under the name James Buttergun put up a message in plain English saying that David only added underage girls to the server. He specified that this was not a joke, even if other users on the server treated it like one. Another user replied, I know, right? Another, some of them are usually like 15 or 16. Another, what the fuck? David's a pedo. This is the part that breaks me. Because if you were on that server, you would have seen it. The kids were saying in plain English, and they were not subtle with their words. The 1,000 kids on that Discord server already had what every adult in this story claimed they were missing. They had eyes. These are posts in his own server. From March of 2023, a full year before Celeste's family would file the first missing persons report, A user going by Ponanzo. One of Ponzalo's posts, according to screenshots that later circulated, David took my little sister's friend to LA to hang in his house while she's 12. The Discord moderators did not act, nor did Interscope, or even David's management. David, according to those same screenshots, threatened to sue one of the users for defamation, saying, "He's about to owe me $30K for the defamation lawsuit." Then, in December of 2023, an unreleased demo leaked from his own Discord server. Someone saved the file. The title on it was Celeste_demo unfin. The song ran nearly 4 minutes. Some of the lyrics: "Oh Celeste, the girl with my name tattooed on her chest. Smell her on my clothes like cigarettes. I hear her voice each time I take a breath. I'm obsessed." According to his own song, she had his name tattooed on her body. In a few weeks, he would go live on Twitch with a young girl visible in the background. A month after that, he would post a TikTok about that Hello Kitty girl I met in 2021. And on February 15th, Celeste Riva Hernandez's family would file the first of 3 missing person reports. 6 weeks. That's all the time anyone needed. In December of 2023, the leaked demo Celeste_demo unfin had been circulating in the server for a few weeks. The lyrics about a name tattooed on a girl's chest, the line about smelling her on his clothes like cigarettes, and him about being obsessed. On December 13th, a screenshot started circulating. It showed David in frame with another person behind him, face partially covered. Someone in the chat asked, "Who's the girl?" David replied, "You're a Fed." 10 days later, on December 23rd, David allegedly recorded another song. He titled the file Celeste. He was 18. She was 13. The song was not officially released. It moved through the Discord server the way everything else did. Kids pulled it down before it got deleted. By the time her family filed the first missing persons report, this song had existed for almost 2 months. Now we get to the live stream. What you're about to see does not happen in a leaked DM or in a private message, or even in a screenshot somebody pulled out of a deleted thread. It happens on a public Twitch stream with hundreds of people watching it in real time. And what comes out of the mouth of a 13-year-old girl in this clip is the single most damning thing she could possibly say about the man sitting next to her. In January of 2024, David goes live on Twitch. He is in a kitchen in California with camera at counter height, and there's a girl sitting next to him. She is wearing oversized glasses and has a hood pulled up. Most of her face is covered, but what you can see is her hair. Curly, black. The same hair the medical examiner would describe in a death investigation 18 months later. It is later confirmed that this girl is Celeste Rivas Hernandez. David is wearing an I Heart Hot Moms t-shirt. The chat is on the screen, and hundreds of people are watching. David reads a comment out loud. "Pray for his career, chat." Another comment scrolls past. "Nah, you going on the Epstein list." He pauses and goes, Yo, wait. Then he turns to the girl next to him and puts his hand on her shoulder. He says, I media trained you. That's controversial. And she says, on stream, in front of hundreds of people watching in real time, "As controversial as you raping kids?" She laughs. She is 13 years old. She's a missing person waiting to happen. And she just looked at the camera and told the entire chat what she is and what he is. He freezes. He looks at her and says, "Are we done? Are we done?" She says, "We need to delete this." He turns to the moderators of his own server. "Mods, can we delete all the VODs? And as soon as the stream ends, delete the stream too. Can we delete everything?" Then he ends the stream. His exact words on the way out: "Really good. It's been a good one. Bye. Bye, guys. Mwah, 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 mwah. Oh my, delete everything. Delete. Delete everything. Everything goes. Everything goes. Everything." That was January of 2024. 3 weeks before her family files a missing persons report. His Discord moderators are watching. His Twitch manager is watching. The fan accounts that turn his every facial expression into a 30-second TikTok are watching. Hundreds of people are watching. Nobody calls anyone. A few weeks later, on February 7th, 2024, David posted a TikTok. He is in a hotel room. His own song is playing in the background. The on-screen caption reads, "When your card declines at therapy and they bring in that one Hello Kitty girl you met in 2021. He drops to his knees. The lyric playing over it is, "I can't stop falling for her." Hello Kitty was what Celeste loved. Hello Kitty Crocs, Hello Kitty mug, Hello Kitty keychain on her bag at school. The missing person poster her family would release a week from this TikTok would list, under last seen wearing, Hello Kitty Crocs. In the TikTok, David is wearing a Hello Kitty keychain attached to his belt loop. One of Celeste's friends would later leak a photo Celeste had allegedly sent her. In it, you cannot see faces. You can see 2 pairs of legs. Celeste's pants and her Hello Kitty Crocs. David's pants. Her hand pulling on a Hello Kitty keychain attached to his belt. Same keychain, outfit, and day. The keychain in that frame is not a coincidence. He had been writing songs about her for months. He had been calling her his girlfriend on his Discord server. A 19-year-old superstar wearing the same Hello Kitty keychain as the 13-year-old he was photographing. That is not what relationships look like at any age. And it is especially not what they look like at theirs. That is just one person trying to disappear into another. That same month, February of 2024, David's manager begins renting a house in the Hollywood Hills, while Celeste begins disappearing from her family home with increasing frequency. On February 14th, 2024, the Riverside County Sheriff's Office logs the first missing person report on a 13-year-old female from Lake Elsinore, Celeste Rivas Hernandez. But the missing person report describes a runaway from Lake Elsinore. She is the kind of case that police departments stack on top of each other every day. A month into being missing, Hollywood police find her. Her own science teacher said in a recording that leaked from the classroom, he told the kids, in his own words, she ran away from home. She was gone for like a month. The cops found her in Hollywood, brought her back to our school. According to her teacher, she was back in his classroom for a few days, telling other kids what had happened. And then she was gone again. That brings us to March 19th, 2024, 7 a.m. at the Naduff family's CCTV at Delgado Spirits. It picks her up jogging past the corner store with a backpack on, wearing a black hoodie and white pants. Her older sister walks into the store the next morning and asks Mr. Naduff to pull the footage. This is the second missing persons report. Police pick her up and bring her home again. The system gets a third chance. On April 5th, 2024, she walked out of her parents' house for the last time. The Riverside County Sheriff's Office logs the third missing persons report. This is the one her family will live with for the rest of their lives. This is the one that does not resolve. Between February 2024 and April 2025, the Riverside County Sheriff's Office will respond to that house 11 separate times. Twice in a single morning on March 19th, 2024. The same morning, the corner store cameras catch her jogging past, wearing a backpack. In May of 2024, the phone rings at her mother's house. It is her daughter's voice. They speak briefly as her mother begs her to come home. That is the last time her mother will hear her voice. 16 days after that final missing persons report, on April 21st, 2024, somebody walks into a Build-A-Bear workshop and fills out a workshop certificate. The name on the certificate is Esmeralda. Esmeralda is Celeste's cousin. The Build-A-Bear is located inside Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California. That same day, April 21st, 2024, David posts a TikTok from Six Flags Magic Mountain. He is on a roller coaster and the camera is on him. Six Flags has a policy. Any guest under 15 has to be accompanied by a chaperone aged 21 or older. Celeste was 13. Steve Fisher, the private investigator we'll get to soon, had found that certificate in a drawer in the Hollywood Hills house. He has been careful about how far he will push this. He has not stated as fact what he believes happened that day. But the framing he gave on camera was this. The cousin was the cover. Adult relatives in Celeste's life may have known on some level where she was. They may not have called the police because the kid was with the cousin, and the cousin was with the rapper. Fisher also flagged a separate photo of Celeste with the same cousin, Esmeralda, in Vegas in 2023 while David was performing there. Soon, David is gearing up for the Withered tour. He is opening for SZA. He's on a major label on Coachella's lineup. In June of 2024, 2 months after the third missing persons report, a photographer is working backstage at the Fonda Theater in Los Angeles. The Fonda is an old movie palace on Hollywood Boulevard with about 2,000 seats and sold-out shows. David is performing that night. Photographers capture a girl behind the velvet rope. CNN later geolocated the photos and confirmed it. That it was Celeste Rivas Hernandez. She is a 13-year-old runaway from Lake Elsinore, listed in 3 open missing persons reports. And she is backstage at a major concert in Hollywood. 6 months later, a private investigator will find a digital camera in a Hollywood Hills house with photos of her on it from January 2025. She is alive in those photos. She is 14 years old, and she has between 4 and 8 months to live. In the official record, Celeste Rivas Hernandez disappears in May of 2024. In the actual world, she does not. Sometime between January and March of 2024, before her family had even filed the first missing person report, a local teenager in Lake Elsinore noticed something on her own street. A black Tesla Model Y idling. A young man getting out of it. That man was David Anthony Burke. He was 18, driving a black Tesla, living just a few blocks from the home of a 13-year-old girl, whose mother would soon be calling police. A few months later, in September of 2024, surveillance footage on her parents' street catches her in an argument with a neighbor. Celeste is yelling while the person she was arguing with screams out to call her dad. Soon, she walks off camera, and that is the last time anyone in Lake Elsinore sees her alive. But she is still alive. Around the new year, in late December of 2024 and early January of 2025, photos are taken in a house in the Hollywood Hills. The photos are taken on a small digital camera, the vintage kind that was popular with influencers that year, making their Instagram look grainy and analog. The photos show two people, a man and a girl. The man is David, and the girl is Celeste. Around this time, on his X account, David posted a selfie of himself wearing a digital camera around his neck. It's the same model. The caption read, "Took these pics." The photos do not surface in early 2025. They sit on the SD card. They sit inside that camera, inside that house, while she is still alive in the photos. What happens to that camera, and how those photos eventually get pulled out of it, is a story we are getting to. But here's what you need to hold on to for now. By January of 2025, Celeste Rivas Hernandez had been an officially missing person for 9 months, and she was being photographed inside a house her boyfriend's manager was paying rent on. Now, look at the rest of this year. In February of 2025, David releases a music video for a song called One More Dance. In the video, he plays a guy who is stuffed into the trunk of a car. The car drives out to the woods, and he's buried. He's 19 when the video drops. In April of 2025, he plays Coachella. A few weeks later, his debut album, Withered, drops. It debuts at number 13 on the Billboard 200. It pulls 500 million streams in its first month. Withered, as in a flower decaying, or the end of a life cycle. He had been telling interviewers for months that the album was a story, that it had to be listened to in order, that it was about the entire arc of one relationship. He goes on tours. The Withered World Tour in Boston, Toronto, Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, sold out venues, and stages a fake funeral every night. Meanwhile, Celeste is somewhere in his orbit. The medical examiner cannot tell us exactly when she dies, but the prosecution's theory, based on evidence presented to a grand jury, is that she dies sometime in the spring of 2025. Around the time he is at Coachella, in late July of 2025, a black model Tesla Model Y with Texas plates is parked on a residential street in the Hollywood Hills on Bluebird Avenue. The car has a dent on the rear bumper. The neighbors notice it because it does not move. Day after day, week after week, it's just sitting there. Late July becomes early August. Early August eventually becomes late August, but the car does not move. On August 27th, a parking enforcement officer marks the rear tire with white chalk, notes the dent, and files the report. We're back where we started. The reason we now know about the Fonda Theater and the photos and the digital camera and the boyfriend in the Hollywood Hills house is not because the LAPD broke this case. It is because 6 weeks after the body was found, a private investigator was hired by the owner of the house. The landlord wanted to know what had happened on his property. The investigator's name is Steve Fisher. He has been a PI for 30 years. And what he found inside that house is part of why the LAPD's case looks the way it does today. On September 18th, 2025, 9 days after the body was found, a team of LAPD officers pull up to a house on a winding street in the Hollywood Hills. The property sits behind a gate. It is not a small place. $3.6 million. Floor-to-ceiling glass on one side, a swimming pool, and a back deck that runs against the canyon. The kind of house you rent for $20,000 a month. The owner of this house is a man named Mladen Trifanovic. He had no idea who was actually living in it. The lease was signed by a man named Josh Marshall with an out-of-state address. Marshall was David's manager. He had paid the rent every month since February of 2024. The actual occupant of the house was the 20-year-old recording artist, whose Tesla had just been pulled out of a tow yard on Mansfield Avenue with a body in it. According to his manager's lease, he was not supposed to be there. At least not officially. The LAPD does not knock politely. This is a forced entry warrant. They use a ramming device on the front door, but nobody's home. David is on tour, and Josh Marshall is in another state. For the next 12 hours, officers comb through that property. They take fingerprints. They take hair samples. Spray luminol on the floors, walls, kitchen counters, and bathroom tiles. They check the sink and shower drains for traces of blood. They go through the garage and laundry room and walk the backyard. They pull electronics, computers, hard drives, phones, cables, anything they could get their hands on. Neighbors say later that they counted about a dozen officers working the scene. Yellow tape went up around the property, and unmarked vehicles lined the streets as officers walked out with evidence bags. When they leave, here's what they do not do. They do not leave a copy of the search warrant, an inventory of what they took. In a normal police search, a homeowner gets both, a copy of the warrant and a receipt itemizing every piece of property that was removed so that the homeowner can later request the return of items that were seized. This is standard procedure. It is, in some jurisdictions, legally required. There is a parallel pattern playing out across town. On September 15th, 2025, the LAPD asked a judge to seal the medical examiner's case file on Celeste Hernandez. The judge denies the request. On November 21st, 2025, they ask again. This time, Superior Court Judge Craig Richman signs the order. The autopsy report will sit under a security hold until the day after the arrest. Dr. Odi Ukpo, the chief medical examiner, will issue a public statement on April 22nd, 2026, calling the delay unfathomable and saying his office had been thwarted in releasing the findings to the family. The same agency that did not open the drawer with the digital camera in it spent the next 7 months making sure nobody could read the autopsy. Mladen Trifanovic, when he hears about the search, drives to his property. The door is broken in. The house has been entered, searched, photographed, and partially stripped. By the time he gets there, the police are gone. A few days later, on September 24th, moving trucks pull up. Josh Marshall has officially terminated the lease. Movers spend 2 days emptying the property. Boxes leave by the truckload. By the time the last truck pulls away, every personal effect of the recording artist who had been living there is gone. Mladen Trifanovic, the actual owner of the property, is now standing inside a house with a shattered front door and a former tenant who has vacated overnight. He calls LAPD but gets no answers. He hires Steve Fisher. Fisher is a private investigator with about 30 years in the business. Licensed in California, he has worked on cases ranging from corporate fraud to homicide. The first thing he does is walk the house, room by room. Search warrants are limited. Officers can only seize what is specifically listed in the warrant. Anything outside the scope stays. There are items inside that house that LAPD either did not see, did not have authority to take, or simply left behind. Fisher found one of those items in a drawer. A small digital camera, and he pulled the SD card. The photos on the camera, Fisher confirmed, showed 2 people, a man and a girl. They were dated to late December of 2024 and early January of 2025. The girl in the photos was Celeste Hernandez, and the man is David. The LAPD spent 12 hours inside this house with a forced entry warrant, and they left without taking the small digital camera in the drawer that had photographs of a then missing 14-year-old on it. Well, on the SD card. A private investigator hired by the landlord 6 weeks later opened the same drawer and found it in plain sight. I do not know what to do with that. I don't know what was the warrant too narrow or the search too rushed or the officers just walked past it. What I know is the photographs that should have closed this investigation spent another 6 weeks sitting in an empty house because nobody from the LAPD opened that drawer. Fisher turned the camera over to the LAPD. He kept walking the property. In a corner of the house, he found something else. A 55-pound DR burn cage incinerator still in its shipping box, advertised at 1600 degrees. For context, human cremation runs at roughly 1400 degrees. The burn cage had been delivered to the Dahoney address under a false name. The deliveries had been accepted at the property, yet the item itself had never been taken out of the box. In another part of the house, Fisher found a chainsaw, also new. The protective shield is still sealed over the chain. LAPD did not seize either item during the September 17th search because both were unused. Neither was material to a possible criminal charge under the warrant, and so they left them behind. Fisher did not stop there. The discovery list, according to his public statements, a Build-A-Bear workshop certificate, which he believes may shed light on Celeste's whereabouts in her last few months, various farm tools that, in his words, would be more at home on a farm than in a Hollywood rental, an email sent to Josh Marshall by a person who had recognized Celeste from photos and was trying to flag that she was a missing person. Marshall, when asked about the email later, denied receiving it. Fisher has produced the email. There is one more discovery on this property we have not gotten to yet. And there is a phone call placed 2,300 miles away on the same day Fisher is walking these rooms. Together, they tell a story about who knew this was coming and who was trying to get out from under it before the LAPD figured out where to look. We're getting there. Fisher has been careful, on camera, about how far he will go in interpreting these items. His framing has been consistent. Fisher also pulled surveillance footage from neighboring properties. The neighborhood, like much of the Hollywood Hills, is saturated with private security cameras. He used the footage to track when the Tesla had been moved to its final parking spot on Bluebird Avenue. He used software to enhance the resolution. He has stated on camera that he believes he can identify the person who drove the Tesla to that spot. He has not said publicly who that driver was, but he has turned that footage over to the LAPD as well. While Fisher is working the scene in California, things are happening 2,300 miles away. On September 18th, the day after the LAPD search, an emergency call comes in to the Waller County Sheriff's Office in Hempstead, Texas. A distorted male voice reported gunshots and a dead body at a residential address. Deputies responded. The address belongs to David's parents. Audio analysis later confirmed that the voice was electronically distorted. It was a swatting call. There were no gunshots or body. Someone had used 911 to send armed police to the front door of the Burke family home. That same day, September 18th, David Burke quietly transfers the deed to one of his Texas homes into a trust fund under his mother's name. 4 days later, on September 22nd, he transfers the deed to a second property. Legal analysts watching this in real time start using one phrase to describe the move: fraudulent conveyance. The legal term for when a person about to be sued, or about to be charged, or about to lose a civil judgment, transfers their assets to a relative to keep them out of reach. From this point forward, David does not return to the Hollywood Hills house, nor does he return to his parents' home in Hempstead. His tour is canceled within 72 hours. San Francisco and LA dropped from the schedule. The entire European leg is killed. For the next 7 months, where he is, who he is with, and what he is doing becomes one of the strangest disappearances in this case. Because while David vanishes from public view, a Los Angeles County grand jury starts hearing testimony in secret. Among the people they pull in, a young streamer named Neil Langston, who used to be one of his closest friends. The grand jury subpoenas him, but Neil refuses to show up. So the LAPD goes to Montana, finds him, arrests him, and forces him on a plane back to Los Angeles. Whatever he tells that grand jury is the part of this case the public still doesn't know. A grand jury is not a trial. This is something that needs to be explained before we go any further, because most people picture courtrooms with judges and lawyers shouting objections, and that's not what this was. A grand jury sits in a closed room. There is no judge or defense attorney. There's no defendant present. There are 16 to 23 citizens sworn to secrecy, listening to one side of the story. The prosecutor brings in witnesses and asks the questions. The prosecutor decides what evidence those citizens hear and what they do not. The witnesses testify under oath. Then they leave. Even the people testifying often do not know what other witnesses have said before them. When they want to lock in testimony from people in a defendant's inner circle, before those people have a chance to coordinate stories. When they want subpoena power to force reluctant witnesses to talk. Between November 2025 and February of 2026, the LA County District Attorney's Office quietly convened 3 of these for the death of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. 3 separate panels of citizens, sworn testimony, and sealed transcripts. Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman was leading it. If that name doesn't mean anything to you, it should. Silverman is one of the most senior homicide prosecutors in the state of California. She is the lawyer who put away the grim sleeper, Lonnie Franklin Jr., a serial killer responsible for the deaths of at least 10 women in South Los Angeles. She has spent her career on cases that involve dead girls and powerful men. She does not get assigned to runaway cases, and yet she was on this one. Starting in late 2025, Silverman brought witnesses into a closed room downtown. The witnesses were people inside David's actual life. His friends, his Fortnite team members, record label representatives, 4 managers, his band, even his family. His parents and his brother Caleb were subpoenaed in early 2026. Their attorneys filed petitions in Texas trying to squash the subpoenas. But a Texas judge denied the petitions and ordered the family to comply. A separate name on the witness list, and a name no one was suspecting, was Neil Langston. Neil Langston was in his early 20s, a streamer with a few 100,000 followers across Twitch, YouTube, and TikTok. He and David were close. The 2 of them appeared in each other's live streams and TikToks. He even had spent extended time at the Hollywood Hills house. According to people who knew them both, Neil had been around for some portion of the spring of 2025. The grand jury issued a subpoena. Neil Langston was ordered to appear in Los Angeles to testify. He did not show up. This is not a small thing. Skipping a grand jury subpoena is a federal level offense. The court does not send a polite reminder, nor does it reschedule. The court issues a warrant for the witness's arrest, and law enforcement goes and finds them. LAPD found him in Montana. In early 2026, officers tracked him down at his residence and arrested him on a material witness warrant. He was processed, booked, and put on a plane to Los Angeles. He was forced into the grand jury room. Whatever he had been trying to avoid saying, he was about to say it under oath, with a senior homicide prosecutor on the other side of the table. We do not know what was said. What we know is what happened in the days after. Neil Langston, freshly returned from Los Angeles, took to social media. He posted a public statement about David. He used the word psycho and wrote that he no longer wanted anything to do with David, that he was disgusted and had been close with him. The hearings went on through November, December, January, February. They heard dozens of witnesses. They looked at forensic evidence, digital records, and phone data. And yet, none of the 3 grand juries produced an indictment. This is one of the strangest features of the case. After 3 separate panels and months of testimony, the prosecution never asked any of those panels to vote on a charging document. Silverman, in open court on April 23, 2026, will explain it in one sentence. The grand juries were convened to investigate, not to indict. The prosecution's choice in the end was to bypass the grand jury system entirely. They charged David through a criminal complaint, signed by the district attorney's office, and a Rammy warrant signed by a judge. It's a probable cause warrant that does not require a grand jury vote. The defense will hammer this distinction at every hearing. The prosecution's response in court has been short. The grand juries were called for investigative reasons. This is what Silverman said on the record. While Neo was being arrested in Montana, the rest of David's life was quietly disappearing. On February 26th, 2026, court documents accidentally surfaced in an unrelated appellate filing. The documents had been sealed. They were not supposed to be public. But a procedural error in a Texas appellate docket allowed them to leak. The documents named David. They described him in legal language as a target of a Los Angeles County grand jury investigation. They stated, in writing, that he may have been involved in having committed the following criminal offenses against the laws of the state of California, to wit, 1 count of murder. The dispute the documents were attached to had nothing to do with murder. It was a fight over whether the grand jury should compel his parents and his brother to testify. His attorneys were arguing parental privilege, arguing duress. But to make the legal argument, prosecutors had to write down what their target was being investigated for. Murder. That filing was the first time the public, the press, and even David's own attorneys saw it confirmed in writing. A few weeks after that, an investigator from Houston, Texas, working on behalf of LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division, flew down to Hempstead. He took statements and pulled records. He requested the cooperation of Waller County Sheriff's Office. The investigation crossed state lines. David, through all of this, said nothing. By the end of February, his defense team had grown. Blair Burke, Marilyn Bednarski, Regina Peter, 3 of the most aggressive criminal attorneys working in Los Angeles, with a combined client list that includes names you would know from celebrity legal trouble. Yet, the team never appeared in court. Their client never gave a press statement. He posted a few cryptic Instagram stories that were quickly deleted. That was the entire public-facing communication strategy, from a recording artist with 2 billion streams on Spotify. The silence was the strategy. But silence does not stop a prosecutor. The Burke family, separately, hired Kent A. Schaefer, a criminal defense attorney based in Houston. Schaefer was the one who filed the petitions in Texas, trying to block David's parents and his brother Caleb from being forced to testify in front of the Los Angeles grand jury. On April 16th, 2026, 7 months and 8 days after Celeste's body was pulled out of the front truck of his Tesla, a tactical team of LAPD officers and U.S. Marshals approached a quiet house on Marmont Avenue, just off Sunset Boulevard. They blocked off the entire road. They surrounded the property. And on the security cameras, at the front gate, a 21-year-old recording artist with a billion-stream debut album watched them coming. He had nowhere left to go. Late afternoon, on a residential street just off Sunset Boulevard, the kind of street where the houses sit behind privacy hedges and you don't know who lives next door because you don't see them, a black armored vehicle rolls onto the block. Then another, followed by several unmarked LAPD SUVs. They form a perimeter around a single house on Marmont Avenue. The street is shut down. Neighbors who happen to be home start filming from upstairs windows. The team approaches the front door. They are not knocking, as they have a RAMI warrant, signed directly by a judge, a battering ram, and the legal authority to use force. The breach team lines up, and the lead officer swings the ram onto the door. Officers stack up behind him, rifles raised, prepared to clear the house room by room. They go in, David is inside. According to LAPD, he is taken into custody without incident. He is walked out of that house in handcuffs by officers from at least 4 divisions of the LAPD. Robbery, homicide, gang unit, narcotics, major crimes, plus federal marshals. The amount of firepower the LAPD brought to this arrest is, in the words of a former federal prosecutor who watched the footage, what you bring when you're dealing with a high-profile or dangerous suspect. Not what you bring for a non-violent 21-year-old recording artist with no prior arrests. They brought it anyway. The arrest is captured by TMZ. A photographer is already outside the house when the breach team rolls in. The footage goes online within an hour. By the time the sun sets in Los Angeles, the entire internet knows. Celeste's mother, in Lake Elsinore, learns about the arrest the way the rest of us did. Here's the part that you need to understand. The house David was arrested in is not the Hollywood Hills mansion his manager had been renting. That house, the one with the digital camera and the boxed up bird cage, was vacated in late September 2025. The lease was terminated. The house he was arrested in on April 16, 2026 is on Marmont Avenue in the Hollywood Hills, just over a mile from the tow yard in North Mansfield Avenue, where Celeste's body was pulled out of his Tesla. For 7 months, while the grand jury heard testimony, David was not in hiding. He was in Los Angeles in the same Hollywood Hills neighborhood where Celeste's body had been found. He had never left. He was held first at Twin Towers Correctional Facility, then transferred on April 20th, 2026, to the Men's Central Jail in downtown Los Angeles, where he was placed in administrative segregation due to the high-profile nature of the case. The arrest report cited 1 count of suspicion of murder under California Penal Code 187A. The next morning, his attorneys released a statement. They pointed out, accurately, that no charges had been filed yet. He had been arrested on suspicion of murder. The district attorney's office now had a window of time under California law to formally file charges. If they filed charges, he would be arraigned. If they did not, he walks. This is the first public communication anyone in David's camp had made about the case in 7 months. The statement was carefully worded. It did not say he was innocent. It said instead that her client was not the cause of death. This is the kind of phrasing that lawyers use when they cannot get away with saying the bigger thing. It admits by what it does not say. He may have been there. He may have moved a body, or he may have helped someone else dispose of her remains. But, according to his lawyers, the cause of death was not him. That single sentence told every legal analyst watching this case what the defense was going to be. They are going to argue that Celeste Rivas Hernandez died of something other than David's hands. An overdose, possibly an accident. Something that happened in his presence, but not for which he is criminally responsible. The DA's office has a different theory. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was 13 years old when she met David in person, 11 the first time he typed her name into a Discord server, 10 when she joined his orbit. She was a child the entire time he knew and photographed her. She was a child when she died. In California, in a case involving the death of a minor in a relationship, the prosecutors believe constituted continuous criminal sexual conduct against a child. The cause of death does not always have to be a single fatal blow. Felony murder is a charge that does not require the prosecution to prove that the defendant intended to kill the victim. It only requires the prosecution to prove that the death occurred during the commission of another felony. If the underlying felony is the sexual abuse of a minor. The death itself, regardless of how it happened, can become the murder charge. That is what the LA County DA's office is reportedly considering. Felony murder, with the predicate felony being continuous sexual abuse of a child. The criminal complaint anchors that abuse to a specific window: September 2023 through September 2024. She turned 13 inside that window and had just turned 14 as it ended. The day after his arrest, the district attorney's office held a brief press availability. They confirmed the arrest, but did not confirm what charges would be filed. They confirmed only the case was being reviewed for filing consideration in the next 48 to 72 hours. Then comes the part that, more than anything else in this case, told the public what the LAPD was sitting on. A statement from the LAPD captain, Scott Williams, from Robbery Homicide Division. "We keep the best we can to keep tabs on him. But once we developed probable cause to arrest him for murder, then we were on him pretty diligently." 3 days later, Deputy Chief Alan Hamilton of the LAPD walked up to a microphone at a press conference. He was asked about the case and gave a one-line answer: "Accountability is coming." On April 20th, 2026, 4 days after the arrest, in a press room in downtown Los Angeles, the Los Angeles County District Attorney, Nathan Hochman, walks up to a podium. Behind him on the wall are 2 photographs. The first is a portrait of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. The second is the LAPD mugshot, taken the day they pulled him out of the Marmot Avenue house. The DA opens with one line: "I'm a parent of 3 children. And a parent's nightmare is a situation where your daughter goes out one night and never comes back." Then he reads the charges. First-degree murder with 3 special circumstances enhancing it: lying in wait, murder for financial gain, and murder of a witness to a criminal investigation. In California, special circumstances are what elevate a murder charge from a maximum of 25 years to life without the possibility of parole, or the death penalty. Hochman states on the record that the determination on whether to seek the death penalty will be made at a later date. Then he keeps reading. Continuous sexual abuse of a child under the age of 14, mutilation of human remains. 3 counts total. They mean that David Burke is facing a sentence that begins at life without parole and ends at the death chamber. The charges themselves were the headline, but the timeline was the gut punch. According to the DA's complaint, on the night of April 23rd, 2025, Celeste Rivas Hernandez went to David's Hollywood Hills home. She went there at his invitation and was never heard from again. Within hours on the same night, David announced his Withered World tour to his fans. The next day, on April 24th, he flew to New York City. On April 25th through 27th, he was at a 3-day fan pop-up event in Manhattan, smiling for cameras. He was in New York while the 14-year-old girl who had walked into his house 24 hours earlier was already dead. That is the prosecution's first allegation. Then comes a second date, May 5th, 2025, 12 days after Celeste was last seen alive, walking into that house. Somebody dismembered her body. Per Steve Fisher, who has been working on the property side of this case from the start, that date is too specific to be a guess. According to him, it almost certainly came from a cooperating witness who was in the room. That night, on May 5th, around 11 p.m., David posted a now-deleted social media update from downtown Los Angeles. He had returned to LA. Investigators, however, recovered the post. 4 days later, On May 9th, 2025, he was photographed in Seoul, South Korea. There is a wound on his hand in those photos. Fisher flagged it publicly. He compared the shape of the wound to the ribbing on a knife David had once shown off in a video taken with Celeste in downtown Los Angeles. Fisher later walked back the certainty of his comparison. He still believes it could be something. Then, the autopsy was unsealed. And what is in those pages is, more than anything else in this case, what tells you the kind of person that was holding the blade and the kind of effort someone made. It tells you about the kind of person who walks away from a body shaped the way Celeste Rivas Hernandez's body was shaped when they found her in the front of that Tesla. The autopsy had been sealed by court order since shortly after Celeste's body was identified on September 16, 2025, at the request of the LAPD. The chief medical examiner, Dr. Odi Ukpo, in a public statement issued the day the seal lifted, said his office had been, in his words, thwarted in releasing the findings sooner. That the family had been forced to wait too long to learn what had happened to their daughter. The report, signed in December of 2025 by Deputy Medical Examiner Dr. Ansel Nam, says the cause of death, multiple penetrating injuries caused by objects. Manner of death, homicide. She was stabbed to death. The head was partially skeletonized. The left eye was, and the soft tissue had undergone liquefaction. The fingers could not be printed because they were waterlogged. The ring and pinky fingers on her left hand had been mutilated and were never recovered. The tube top she was wearing had multiple holes punched through it, front and back. The number of holes lined up with the number of penetrating wounds on her body. Investigators swabbed the handles and zippers of the cadaver bags. 2 penetrating wounds in her torso, both with smooth edges. The first was in her right abdomen, 21 inches below the top of her head. It penetrated her skin and her liver. The wound track was 1.5 inches deep. The second wound was in the lower left chest, 15 inches below the top of her head. It penetrated her skin and the intercostal space between her ribs and entered the chest cavity. The wound track was at least 2 inches deep. The cortical bone of the adjacent ribs was disrupted. That means the blade hit bone hard enough to mark the bone itself. When the medical examiner cross-referenced the wounds against the clothing Celeste was wearing when she was found, the holes lined up. Multiple punctures, front and back, through her tube top. The medical examiner did not say it was the knife, only that the wounds were consistent with a sharp instrument with smooth edges. The lawyers will fight over what that distinction means. Defense will argue smooth edges leaves room for objects other than a knife. Prosecutors will argue that the tool marks on the ribs are enough to match a specific blade. Then, the autopsy describes the dismemberment. Both upper and lower extremities, no hemorrhage at the cuts, which means in the small mercy of forensic medicine, the dismemberment happened after death. The right arm cut off 9 inches below the shoulder. The left arm cut off 5 inches below the shoulder. The right leg cut in 2 places. The left leg cut in 2 places. The left 4th and 5th fingers amputated. The medical examiner notes, embedded in the cut surfaces are multiple fragments of blue plastic. They're collected by criminalists and submitted to evidence on the day the body was discovered. Blue plastic gets you a manufacturer or a tool. In the right hands of a forensic toolmark analyst, it even gets you a name. The autopsy contains other details the prosecution will not need to argue at trial, but which tell you what the medical examiner was looking at when he signed the report. A forensic pathologist consulted later by Law and Crime made one observation about the dismemberment that lands harder than the rest of the autopsy. Whatever did this did not go for the joints. Most people who attempt to dismember a body, even untrained, will try to disarticulate it at major joints. It comes instinctively. The hip, the shoulder, the elbow, or the knee. Whoever cut Celeste Hernandez into pieces did not. They cut through bone. They were trying to make her smaller, to compact her and fit her into a confined space. A confined space the size of, for example, the front trunk of a 2023 Tesla Model Y. This is the moment in the case where intent stops being an argument. There is no version of this where her body was being prepared a respectful disposal. There is no scenario where someone was trying to do this carefully or correctly. Someone was trying to fit a 14-year-old girl into a small space, and they did not care what they had to do to her body to make it work. Now, consider what is in the music video for Romantic Homicide. The blindfolded figure, called Itami, in David's own words, told interviewers, would commit the crimes that I would have to solve as the detective. A detective solving murders he had committed himself. The autopsy also closes a few questions. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was not pregnant. The medical examiner inspected the uterus. Whatever theories had been circulating for 7 months, the autopsy closes that question. Toxicology was less clean. Initial screens flagged presumptive positives for 3 different substances: benzodiazepines, methamphetamine, and MDMA. Confirmation testing did not back any of those positives up. The only substance the lab confirmed was ethanol, and the medical examiner attributed that to the breakdown of decomposing tissue, not to anything she had been drinking before she died. There was one more detail in the autopsy report. The medical examiner, going over her body, photographed and cataloged every distinguishing mark. One of those marks was on the inside of her right index finger. A small tattoo, 4 letters long. Shh. Remember in chapter 3, when I said we'd come back to that detail? Cross-referenced against publicly available photos of David Burke's hands, the same tattoo appears on his finger. Same placement and word. 48 hours after the press conference, Celeste's family released their first public statement in 7 months. That Celeste was a beautiful, strong girl who loved to sing and dance. That they spent wonderful times together where every Friday night was movie night. That they love her very much and miss her deeply. They all want justice for Celeste. The family, represented by attorney Patrick Steinfeld, attended the April 20th arraignment in person, sitting in the gallery while Hochman read the charges. 3 days later, when the autopsy findings were unsealed at the April 23rd hearing, they did not come. Seinfeld told reporters the findings had caused them profound emotional pain. On one side, there was David, a popular artist with 2 billion streams, and on the other side of it, a family that just wanted Friday night movie night. The week after the press conference, the defense filed a motion that surprised every legal commentator who had been following this case. David's lead attorney, Blair Burke, asked the court to fast-track the preliminary hearing. A preliminary hearing in California is the proceeding where the prosecution presents enough evidence to convince a judge that the trial should go forward. It is not a trial. There is no jury, and the standard is much lower. The prosecution does not have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They only have to show probable cause and a crime was committed, and that the defendant was the one who committed it. In a normal first-degree murder case, especially one with this much evidence and this much media attention, The defense delays the preliminary hearing as long as legally possible. Every day of delay is another day the prosecution has to keep its witnesses in line. Another day for evidence to degrade. Another day for the news cycle to move on. Burke did the opposite. She invoked her client's right to a speedy preliminary hearing. She told the court she wanted it scheduled within the statutory window, 10 court days after the arraignment. She wanted to see the prosecution's case in open court as soon as possible. There is one reason a defense attorney makes this move. She does not believe the prosecution has what they say they have. That move makes more sense once you remember the grand jury never indicted. 5 months of testimony, dozens of witnesses, and yet no charging document. Burke knows this. She is going to argue in every motion from now until trial that the criminal complaint sits on a foundation that 23 citizens in a closed room would not sign their name to. The next morning, in a downtown LA courtroom, David appeared for his arraignment. He was in an orange jumpsuit. Courtroom sketch artists captured him sitting at the defense table with his lawyers, calm and composed with no visible emotion. According to reporters in the room, he did not look at the gallery or at his attorneys. He looked straight ahead. David pleaded not guilty. In open court, Deputy District Attorney Beth Silverman started laying out a piece of what the prosecution had been holding behind sealed doors. She told the court that as part of the investigation, law enforcement had obtained search warrants for David's phone and his cloud storage accounts. She said that when investigators went through that data, they had recovered, in her words, a significant amount of child sexual abuse material. Possession of CSAM is a separate felony in California, punishable independently of any other charge. Production of it is a more serious felony. Distribution is more serious still. Silverman said that the analysis was ongoing, and not all the data had been fully reviewed yet. The last sentence is what matters. There is a procedural wrinkle that makes that discourse more important than it sounds. Under federal child pornography protocol, the district attorney's office cannot simply hand that material over to the defense counsel, the way other evidence gets disclosed. CSAM has to flow through specific court-supervised channels. Defense attorneys can review it, but only inside designated facilities, only under tightly controlled chain of custody, with the material itself never leaving the secure environment. That protocol exists to prevent the further distribution of the images. It has a side effect in cases like this one. It slows discovery, and it gives the prosecution more time to keep finding more. Every week, Silverman's office spends inside that 3 terabytes of iCloud data. Is another week this case can pick up additional charges before it gets to a jury. If a prosecutor stands up at an arraignment and tells the court that the digital evidence in the case has not been fully reviewed yet, what they are telling the defense is that more is coming. The prosecution had also disclosed, in earlier filings, the total volume of evidence in this case, 40 terabytes. To put that in perspective, a standard iPhone holds 256 gigabytes of data. 40 terabytes is 40,000 gigabytes. That is the equivalent of approximately 156 fully loaded iPhones. It is roughly 6,000 hours of high-definition video. It is enough text to fill the Library of Congress 2.5 times over. The prosecution had collected nearly 40 terabytes of evidence of a 21-year-old recording artist. But, as of the April 23rd hearing, only about 30% of it had been turned over to the defense. Some of that was witness testimony from the grand jury. Some of it was forensic analysis from the Hollywood Hills house, surveillance footage from the Tesla being moved, and some of it was from the digital camera Steve Fisher had pulled out of the drawer in late September of 2025. But a substantial portion of it was the contents of David's iPhone and his iCloud account. David was a recording artist who lived on his iPhone. He recorded songs on his phone. He posted to TikToks from his iPhone. He answered Discord messages from his iPhone. He took photos with the small vintage digital camera Fisher would later find. But he carried his iPhone everywhere. The phone was the instrument. It was a diary into his whole life. The DA's office served warrants on Apple, and Apple complied. Whatever was on that device, whatever had ever been on that device, whatever had ever passed through that device on its way to the cloud, is now inside a forensic vault in downtown Los Angeles, being reviewed by federal-level digital forensics experts. Now, reconsider Burke's fast-track motion. It takes one of two assumptions. Either she has reason to believe the prosecution is bluffing about the contents of those devices, or she has reason to believe they are not bluffing, and she wants to see exactly what they have before the prosecution finishes reviewing it. Then came the moment in court that told the public which one. 2 days after the arraignment, on April 23rd, Beth Silverman stood at a procedural hearing and disclosed something nobody on the outside had known. The LAPD had been running a wiretap on David. She did not give a date range and did not say when it started or when it ended. While David was sitting in that Marmot house, thinking the silence was working, federal-grade audio surveillance was capturing his calls, his conversations, and his coordination with whoever was helping him. He had been talking, and the LAPD had been listening. The defense, watching all of this, also knew something else the public was just starting to understand. According to reporting that emerged in the weeks before the arrest, LAPD investigators had spent months focused on a trip David made to a remote area of Santa Barbara County in the spring of 2025. Tracking data placed him there in the middle of the night for hours, in the same window prosecutors believe Celeste died. Mark Garagos, a defense attorney with no role in this case, but who has been commenting on it publicly, speculated on camera that the body may have been moved between locations, between April 23rd and the day that Tesla was abandoned on Bluebird Avenue. Whatever happened in Santa Barbara County, the LAPD has not announced publicly, but it explains why the digital evidence in the case runs to 40 terabytes. Then, Silverman pointed out on the record that defense counsel had not yet even received a copy of the autopsy report. She had not yet been provided with the autopsy, despite her client being charged with first-degree murder. She had publicly stated her client did not cause Celeste Hernandez's death without ever having read that autopsy that determined the cause of death. Her defense, the forward position she had carried into the press for a week, was being made not on the basis of evidence she had reviewed, but on the basis of statements her client had given her in person. This is not a defense built on evidence. That is a defense built on what the defendant said happened. 2 hours into the hearing, Silverman made a comment that landed harder than anything the defense had said all week. She said she did not understand how the preliminary hearing could go forward when the defense had not yet seen the autopsy. The judge agreed. The hearing was pushed back. The fast track had hit its first wall. A few days later, Hochman was asked at a press availability whether there was a single piece of evidence, a smoking gun, that could bring a murder charge in court. Her answer was on its face a non-answer, but underneath, It was the prosecution's entire theory. The smoking gun, he said, is the totality of the evidence. There is no single video or confession. There are no eyewitnesses who watched the murder happen. The defense, meanwhile, is sprinting towards that courtroom because they need to see what the prosecution actually has before the prosecution finishes building it. There is one question Burke's fast-track motion does not answer. Did David act alone? A 21-year-old recording artist on tour for most of 2025 did not by himself murder a 14-year-old girl in a house he was not on the lease for, dismember her body, transport that body across multiple locations in Los Angeles County, store her in the trunk of a Tesla for months, drive that Tesla to a parking spot in Hollywood Hills, and walk away. The prosecution, when asked directly, has refused to say nobody else will be charged. There are at least 3 names that keep coming up. One of them is in Montana. Another is the manager whose name is on the lease. And one of them, according to Fisher, may be the witness who gave the LAPD the date of May 5th. The case the prosecution is building has one fundamental problem. It's the same problem the LAPD has been working around since the day the Tesla was opened. A 21-year-old recording artist on a world tour did not, by himself, do all of this. Look at the timeline Hochman laid out at the press conference. April 23rd, 2025, Celeste arrives at the Hollywood Hills house at David's invitation. She is murdered that night. April 24th, David boards a flight to New York. April 25th through 27th, he is at a 3-day pop-up event in Manhattan. Photographed, filmed, posing with fans, smiling. May 5th, somebody dismembers her body. The DA was specific about that detail. He named the date, May 5th, 11 p.m. David posts a now deleted social media update from downtown LA. He has returned. May 9th, he is photographed in Seoul, South Korea. For 12 days, between April 23rd and May 5th, a 14-year-old girl's body was somewhere. Not in the trunk of the Tesla yet. Inside that Hollywood Hills house, presumably. Or moved between locations. Refrigerated, hidden, or being watched. For most of those 12 days, David was in New York City. That means somebody else was in the house with a 14-year-old's body for the better part of 2 weeks, while the recording artist whose Tesla she ended up in was 3,000 miles away, signing autographs. When Hochman was asked directly at the April 20th press conference whether anyone else would be charged, here is what she said. "You will know about them if we do, but not at this point. I'm not commenting." That is not a denial. That is a prosecutor leaving the door open. 3 names keep coming up. The first is John Marshall. Marshall is David's manager. He is the one whose name appears on the lease for the Hollywood Hills house. The actual owner of that house, Mladen Trivanovic, told reporters that he had no idea David Burke was even living there. He thought he had rented his property to a man named John Marshall. That was the only name on the contract. Steve Fisher has produced a copy of an email Marshall received in early 2025 from a person who recognized Celeste from photos and was trying to flag that she was a missing person. Marshall publicly denied receiving the email. Fisher has produced the timestamp. Marshall has not been arrested. He has not, to public knowledge, been charged with anything. His role in the timeline of the body's disposal between April 23rd and September 8th has not been publicly explained. The second name is Neo Langston. According to the report, Neil Langston testified before the grand jury for 30 to 40 minutes. Grand jury testimony in a homicide case typically runs for hours. A friend who lived alongside the defendant for months, who had been at the Hollywood Hills house, who had presumably been around for some portion of the spring of 2025, would normally be on the stand for half a day or longer. Prosecutors lock in every detail. They walk the witness through every conversation and establish timelines down to the day. 30 to 40 minutes is what a witness produces when he pleads the Fifth. Pleading the Fifth is your constitutional right. It is also, in a homicide grand jury, a signal that the witness believes his own truthful testimony would incriminate him. You do not plead the Fifth to a question about whether your friend committed murder. You plead the Fifth to a question about your own role in what happened to the body. The third name is the one most people have not heard. Robert Morgenroth, general manager of a music management firm called Mogul Vision. Mogul Vision is part of the team that managed David's career. Morgenroth was subpoenaed before the grand jury and questioned about the singer's movements and the handling of the case. The handling of the case is what a manager does when his client is under criminal investigation by coordinating attorneys, coordinating with the label, with PR, possibly with people inside the artist's life, travel, and cancellations. There is a fourth person nobody is named. Steve Fisher, in his work for the property owner, recovered surveillance footage from neighboring houses around Bluebird Avenue. Using that footage, he tracked the movement of the Tesla to its final parking spot on July 29th, 2025. He used software to enhance the resolution. He believes he can identify the driver of the Tesla on the day it was abandoned. He has not said publicly who that driver was. That driver, whoever they are, is one of the last people to have physically handled Celeste's body. The DA's case for the first-degree murder is built on David. But the case underneath the case, the one Burke is sprinting to see, is the one the LAPD has been quietly building against the people who were in that house with a body for 12 days. The preliminary hearing is scheduled to begin May 1st, 2026, before Judge Charlene F. Olmedo. It is expected to run 4 to 5 days. Whatever the prosecution presents in that courtroom, whatever they put into the world, whatever they put on the stand, the world will find out exactly which of those names is cooperating, which one is being protected, and which one is the next person being charged. Because if the dismemberment in that house took 2 people, and only one of them is currently in the men's central jail, the prosecution is not done. The question is when. And there is one more name that has not come up yet. A name that lives outside California, attached to one of the more disturbing details in this entire case. A swatting call placed to a house in Hempstead, Texas, in the voice of a man who knew exactly which house to target on the exact night David's deeds start being transferred into a trust. A swatting call is not a hoax in the way most people think of a hoax. It is a deliberate weapon. The caller knows when they make the call that armed deputies will respond to a residential address at high readiness. They know the deputies will be expecting an active shooter. They know, statistically, that swatting accidents have killed people. They have injured deputies and have even ended in fatal shootings of confused homeowners who did not understand why armed officers were storming through their front door. Whoever placed that call to the Waller County dispatcher knew which residential address to target. They knew the sheriff's office would respond with weapons drawn. Whether that caller was an internet troll, a fan looking to provoke a response, or someone with leverage on David. The timing is the kind of coincidence investigators tend to pull on. Now, consider the other thing happening in David's life on September 18th, 2025. His career was over, and he knew it. Interscope and Darkroom did not just freeze the deluxe album, they dropped him outright in late 2025, scrubbing his name from their websites and streaming service affiliations. Sony Music Publishing dropped him. His booking agency, The Team, dropped him. YouTube demonetized and suspended his account in April of 2026. Then the collaborators started pulling their work. Kali Uchis pulled their song Crashing from streaming and posted publicly that he was not her friend. Holly Humberstone pulled Super Blood Moon. Damiano David reissued his entire album with a solo version of Tangerine, replacing the original David feature. Laffy pulled This Is How It Feels. Madden NFL 26 quietly removed his song. The Spilt Milk Festival in Australia removed him from the lineup. Hollister pulled the merchandising campaign. Crocs scrubbed the Dream Drop collaboration that had launched 5 days before the body was found. Epic Games opened self-service refunds for every David Fortnite cosmetic on April 28th, 2026. There is a detail in there that's hard to sit with. 5 days before LAPD opened the front trunk of that Tesla, Epic Games released Locked and Loaded, the first ever official Fortnite album, Anthem. The artist on the track was David. He was the top searched musician on Google in 2025. He was the top searched person on Google in 2025, period. The week his alleged victim's body was identified, his Spotify streams doubled. The European leg of the Withered tour had been canceled. His Discord moderators were quietly purging messages. His own friends were starting to distance themselves online. The legal cleanup was beginning. 2 homes, both in Texas, both held in his name, both about to become potentially recoverable assets if a civil judgment or criminal forfeiture were eventually entered against him in Los Angeles. He was 20 years old and had earned a roughly $15 million in his short career. He had assets to protect, and he had started moving them. A trust under his mother's name is the standard playbook. It does not, legally speaking, place those assets entirely beyond reach. A court can unwind a fraudulent conveyance, and lawyers know this, but it does delay the process. It buys time. It forces a plaintiff or a prosecutor to litigate the trust before they can touch the underlying property. In a long enough legal fight, that delay can be the difference between getting paid and getting nothing. There is one thread in this case that the public has paid almost no attention to, and which the prosecution will, if it goes to trial, use to explain the special circumstance of murder for financial gain. In Fisher's reading, photos of David in Lake Elsinore conducting what he describes as paper bag transactions. A science teacher at Lakewood Village Middle School, the same teacher who told his class on a hidden recording that Celeste had run away with a rapper, telling people that there were individuals extorting David. Fisher has said that he believes this is what was happening, and that he has additional evidence he has not yet released. In Fisher's reading, Celeste herself was aware of it. He has said, "I think Celeste was aware that there was people trying to financially gain off of that situation to keep things quiet." That is Fisher's theory, not an established fact in the criminal complaint. But here's why it matters. The DA's special circumstance for first-degree murder is financial gain. Hockman, at the press conference, was specific. He said the financial gain was David's effort to maintain his very lucrative musical career that Celeste was threatening on that particular night. If Fisher's framework is right, the financial gain is not just about preserving the career, but it's about ending the leverage and killing the witness. It's about killing the source of the extortion, the person whose words could simultaneously destroy his music and end the payments he had been making to keep the rest of it quiet. In that reading, Celeste was not just a girlfriend the prosecution argues that he silenced. She was the only living asset his alleged extortionist could point to as proof of what they had on him. Once she was gone, his entire problem theoretically went away. Except, of course, that whoever had been extorting him would now be sitting on the most valuable secret in entertainment. The Waller County Sheriff's Office has not, to public knowledge, identified the swatting caller. The investigation, more than a year later, remains open. The Texas file case has been folded into the LAPD's robbery-homicide investigation. Whatever is in it has not been made public, and the only person currently sitting in a cell for it is the one whose name was on the registration. But there is one more thing that this case asks us to do, and it is the thing I want to leave you with at the end of this video. Celeste Rivas Hernandez is not a case file. She's not a thumbnail. She is not a name on a true crime channel's quote of upcoming videos. She's just a 14-year-old girl. The people in Lake Elsinore who knew her since she was in kindergarten remember her as the quiet, shy one, born in a small town in Riverside County, California, to a family that had come from El Salvador and built a life from nothing. She liked Hello Kitty. Her mother told reporters after the body was found that Celeste used to tell her she loved her every single day. She wanted to sing and dance. She was a 7th grader. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend. She was the quiet one in the back of the classroom who liked candy and soda and ducked into the corner store on her way home from school. Her body was found one day after what would have been her 15th birthday. There was a memorial outside her family's home in Lake Elsinore, full of flowers, candles, stuffed animals, and a photo of a girl with thick black curls and a soft smile. Her neighbor, the woman who has lived a few houses down since Celeste was in kindergarten, started it. She said, "I don't want her remembered as a rebellious kid or a runaway. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She was a young girl just trying to figure out life, and she doesn't get to grow up." But none of that brings Celeste Rivas Hernandez back. So when this case is over, and when the verdict is read, I want you to remember the right name, not the alter ego of the artist with the billion streams. Her name was Celeste Rivas Hernandez. She does not get to grow up, but she does get to be remembered.